Help me hit 7,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Thank you. I never imagined a simple text could feel like a punch to the chest. Yet here I was, staring at my phone, frozen. The message blinked on my screen like it was mocking me. I'm with Jake tonight. I'm Ethan, 34, and I thought I understood the dynamics of my relationship with Lila. She's magnetic, witty, the kind of person who lights up a room without even trying. We've been together for 6 years. Shared laughter, secrets, small victories, and quiet defeats. I never believed jealousy would sneak into my chest, but at that moment, it did. Not the petty, burning kind, but a slow, cold realization. I took a deep breath and scrolled back through our conversations, trying to find a hint, a trace, anything that might explain this. But there wasn't one. She'd been warm, playful, the same girl I met in college, the same girl I brought home to meet my parents, the same girl I thought I could trust. The thing about texts is they remove context. One line, 3 words, and suddenly the world you've built in your head starts to wobble. I could almost hear her voice saying it, casual, maybe even teasing. But in my chest, it felt deliberate, sharp, like she had written it to hurt me. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't want the knee-jerk reaction that could make me say something I'd regret. Instead, I put the phone down and walked over to the window, pressed my forehead against the cool glass, and let the silence seep in. The city lights outside blurred into streaks as my thoughts spiraled. I knew I had 2 choices, react or act. And deep down, I realized that reacting would only give her more power. Our relationship had always been delicate, not fragile but precise. Lila thrives on spontaneity, unpredictability, the thrill of attention. I, on the other hand, crave consistency, honesty, and respect. Somewhere along the line, those differences had collided, forming cracks I thought were small, but evidently, they were wide enough for a little chaos to slip through. I remembered the morning she had brushed past me in the kitchen, distracted, pretending nothing was wrong while her laughter had been delayed, forced. I remembered the nights I stayed up, waiting for a simple text, a sign she still cared, only to be met with silence. It wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no betrayal in the conventional sense. Just subtle, grinding indifference, the kind that eats away at you quietly until you feel invisible. Yet, reading that message now, I felt a clarity I hadn't before. Lila's little game wasn't just about seeing how I'd react. It was a reflection of something deeper, a disregard I could no longer ignore. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Not hers, mine. I sat down at my desk, ran a hand through my hair, and began crafting a reply. Not a text dripping with anger, not a message meant to shame or guilt. Something simple, precise, and final. It had to do one thing: remove the thrill of her manipulation entirely. As my fingers hovered over the keyboard, I thought about Milo, my best friend since college. Milo had always told me, "Ethan, you can't let anyone play chess with your emotions if you're playing checkers in life." I smiled bitterly at the memory. He'd been right then, he's right now. The realization hit me harder than any insult could. It wasn't about Jake. It was never about Jake. It was about me, my worth, and how much I was willing to tolerate before reclaiming it. I glanced back at the message one last time. 3 words that carried so much weight. And then I typed my reply. Short, calm, unshakable. I hit send before my hand could hesitate. The phone made the familiar whoosh sound, and suddenly the tension in my chest didn't vanish. It sharpened, crystallized. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet, but I felt aligned. Finally aligned with a version of myself that refused to be silenced, refused to be toyed with, refused to let anyone diminish his value. Lila's little game had been clever, teasing, and maybe even fun for her. But it wasn't clever enough. Not this time. Not with me. I stood there, letting the quiet hum of the city seep into me, thinking about the night ahead. She would check her phone, read my words, maybe feel a pang of confusion or surprise. And somewhere deep down, I knew she would realize that the power she thought she held had shifted. It wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries, respect, self-preservation, and for the first time in months, I felt a kind of peace that had been absent from my life. I didn't need fireworks. I didn't need drama. I just needed clarity. And now, for the first time, I had it. By the time Lila responded, the night had deepened into a quiet hum outside my apartment. I didn't check my phone immediately. I wanted to sit with the stillness for a moment, to let the calmness I'd carved out in part one of my evenings settle in. When I finally did, her reply blinked on the screen. "Ethan, what is this?" I could almost hear the hesitation in those 3 words. Her little game, the one she thought was playful, had collided with something she hadn't expected. Certainty. I didn't reply immediately. I let the text sit there, like a pebble in a pond, waiting for the ripples to form. For years, I had been accommodating, bending over backward to ensure Lila felt loved and secure. I'd memorized her coffee order, stayed late at work just to pick up groceries, held my tongue during arguments I could have won easily, and tolerated her moods without complaint. But there comes a moment when patience isn't virtue, it's surrender. And tonight, surrender wasn't on my table. Lila, of course, didn't understand this at first. Her next message was longer, a mix of frustration and curiosity. "Are you seriously ignoring me? Are you going to text me back, or just sit there?" I smiled faintly, not because I was gloating, but because clarity tastes different than anger. I typed slowly, deliberately. "I read your text. I understand what you wanted to provoke. I won't play games with my emotions anymore." It took her a moment, probably longer than she expected, to comprehend the weight of that message. I imagined her pacing, maybe throwing a cushion onto the couch in exasperation, realizing that the thrill she relied on for control had vanished. I didn't taunt. I didn't beg. I simply reclaimed my own agency. Hours later, she called. Not a text this time, a call, shaky, uncertain. "Ethan, can we talk?" I paused. Normally, I would have answered, but I had learned something crucial. Engagement doesn't equal resolution. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than words. I let it go to voicemail. Then I watched the little icon flash, knowing that the power dynamics had shifted. The games she had been used to were no longer effective. The following morning, I sat with Milo at our usual cafe, sipping coffee and recounting the events. "You handled it well," he said, leaning back with that knowing smirk of his. "Most guys would have sent 10 texts, tried to guilt her, begged for an explanation. You didn't. You acted, and that's what matters." Felt strange, almost foreign, to hear those words. I had always been taught that love meant patience, endurance, and compromise. But I had discovered a subtle truth. Self-respect and boundaries are equally, if not more, vital. Love without those is just convenience. By the time Lila returned home that evening, the energy had shifted entirely. I saw it the moment she walked through the door. Hesitation, almost regret. Not that she would admit it, not that she would say it out loud. But she knew she had underestimated me, and that realization is quieter and more powerful than any shouted argument. Her first words, tentative, tested the waters. "Ethan, I didn't mean." I held up a hand. "Lila, you didn't need to mean anything. I just acted in accordance with what I believe I deserve. Honesty, respect, and clarity. That's not negotiable." The rest of the night was quiet. She tried small talk, carefully choosing words. I answered politely without agitation. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't arrogance. It was simple alignment with reality. And somewhere in that silence, a lesson crystallized for both of us. Boundaries are more valuable than approval, and clarity is stronger than affection manipulated. Weeks later, the dynamic between us had subtly shifted. Lila, for all her charm and charisma, seemed to move differently around me. Less testing, less playing. She realized that my respect was not something to earn through games. It was inherent to my behavior, my standards, and my choices. I never said, "I told you so." I didn't need to. The shift was evident in the way she interacted, in the absence of provocation, and in the quiet, deliberate strength I carried in every decision. The biggest lesson, the one I hold on to now, is this: control over your emotions is a form of power. Not power to dominate or humiliate, but power to preserve dignity, protect self-worth, and navigate relationships with clarity and intentionality. I didn't need to destroy her. I simply refused to let her destroy me. And in that refusal, I found something I had been searching for long before this little game began. Peace. A sense of self unshaken by manipulation, unaltered by drama, and completely aligned with the values I hold most dearly. The text she sent that night? It had been meant to unsettle me, to provoke jealousy, to stir doubt, to watch me scramble. Instead, it revealed a truth that had been quietly waiting beneath the surface for years. The real power in any relationship lies not in who can manipulate the other, but in who remains steady in their self-respect, no matter the chaos. I put the phone down. The sun had risen outside, pale and steady, painting the city in soft gold. And I finally smiled, not because I had won, not because she had lost, but because I had regained the only thing that truly mattered, myself.